Contending with Paul, the hidden story behind the writing of Matthew, Mark, and Luke by William Joseph Cobble. The Foreword. Classifying this book into an existing genre might prove difficult. It has the provocative title Contending with Paul, but it is about much more than Paul. Within these pages one will find history, theology, biography, and biblical criticism. Our exploration begins with the original devotees of Jesus who, after his departure, were left to determine the correct way in which to understand and remain faithful to his message. Had Jesus changed the human condition by his ministry and death, and if so, how? Was there one set of instructions for all believers, or were Jews and Gentiles expected to follow Jesus in different ways? Opinions differed. Maybe those in opposition could be brought to a consensus, but they could also clash and go their separate ways. The New Testament provides examples of both. Unsurprisingly, the longest-serving followers of Jesus, i.e. the 12 apostles, might not share the perspectives of a relative latecomer, i.e. Paul. This dynamic is not uncommon in human enterprises. Conflict, rebuke, and rebuttal, when it occurred in the first generation of believers, could take place loudly and face-to-face, or through the writing and dissemination of passionate letters. When the second generation of believers entered onto the scene, it could also manifest in the new literary form Christians call Gospels. This book will focus primarily on Christianity's first two generations. The first generation includes the apostles, Jesus' family members, and Paul. It is this generation who would first debate how the message of Jesus should be presented to the Gentile world and what would be expected of those Gentiles who desired to follow Jesus. It is the second generation of believers who began to write Gospels. The Gospel of Mark, the Gospel of Matthew, and the Gospel of Luke are the earliest three to have survived. Though all three Gospels were written after the death of Paul, it will be suggested in this book that each Gospel writer contended with his continuing influence in some way, though each from their own distinctive vantage point. The apostles and Paul were men about whom much can be known. It is Paul who especially reveals himself through his letters. There we find a driven man who, after his religious experience, never seems to tire either of the journey or the fight. The book of Acts presents Paul as making 3 missionary journeys, but it is very likely that Paul saw himself as constantly on mission. He believed Jesus to be returning soon, and there was no time to waste. The authors of Mark, Matthew, and Luke will each be shown to have unique worldviews, commitments, and agendas. These were not dispassionate mystics who simply channeled messages from God, but men who assertively advocated for their own ideas and reacted literarily to those who had written before them. This often left them at odds with one another, though this is seldom recognized by the modern reader. My desire is for you to know each of these figures better: Peter, the chief apostle; James, the brother of Jesus; Paul, the new believer; and the writers that have come to be known to history as Mark, Matthew, and Luke. It is also my goal that you will become aware of the fascinating interactions between these men and how these interactions shaped much of the anthology that we now call the New Testament. I hope you are up for this journey. It can be difficult to meet your heroes. These men will seldom be the saints of Christian legend, yet in many ways they will be much more. Even today, Christian groups can find themselves breaking apart into ideological camps. As with the early church, conflicts may be argued in person, resolved by committee, or debated through literary composition. Therefore, nothing within these pages should be astonishing, for they are not so different from us. Continuing with Paul, the hidden story behind the writing of Matthew, Mark, and Luke by William Joseph Cobble.